Sometimes he sends me messages through really weird channels. No, we're good.
All right. And let's go.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are live. Days away. That is how long we've got until the National Hockey League season is back. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am, of course, Kevin Olenek. You can follow us on Twitter, podcast_hockey. We are live on Facebook, facebook.com, the Hockey Podcast, youtube.com, Hockey Podcast, and also subscribe later to wherever you get your podcasts. And so I'm going to start with the beef, Sean. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Kevin.
I come on. I have an injured foot. I was up most of the night dealing with this injured foot, and I'm here playing. I'm not 100%, but I'm playing. But Devin,
self-inflicted wounds, and he's two self-inflicted wounds last night, and is unfit to play for this podcast.
Yeah. How is half of your or 2/3 of your team down and the season hasn't started yet?
No. What are we, the Dallas Stars? Like, what is going on here? So, yeah. So there. That's what I had to say. But anyway, Devin's not with us. Sean is with us, and Dan Stephenson from the Fireside Podcast is here, and Matt could be joining us, may not be joining us. Who knows? But we are. Yes, it'll be. It's we'll keep you in suspense. Dun dun dun. But we are here to do a deep dive for the Calgary Flames as we continue our Northern Division or Scotiabank Northern Division, Canadian Division. What are you calling this division, by the way, Dan? What have you chosen?
I'm just calling it the Canadian Division. I think it's kind of silly to call it the Northern Division because there are no U.S. teams. Like, either call it the Canadian Division or go back to the like Campbell, Clarence, that sort of thing. Call it like some Canadian player name, but it's the Canadian Division.
Yeah.
The Gordie Howe Division. Devin would be happy with that.
The Wayne Gretzky Division, something like that. And actually, are we supposed to call it the Northern Division presented by Scotiabank?
It's the Scotia North Division, I think is how they want it. As opposed to, was it the Discover Central? Because you're discovering all these teams.
That's right, for the first time.
Or the Honda West Division, where like it's named after a car dealership here in Calgary.
That's right, the Henninger Toyota.
Yes. Well, this year the Flames are actually brought to you by the Vancouver Canucks. It seems, as the three.
Sorry, that's wrong, Kevin. They're actually also sponsored by Scotiabank.
Who are
the Flames?
Oh, the Flames. Yes. Well, but kind of the new look Flames. Brought on by the Vancouver Canucks. The big acquisition, of course, was Markstrom, then Tanev, and then they got Domingue, and then Levo. We asked for Pedersen, no go. We asked for Horvat, no go.
A couple years ago when we brought Smitty and Lucic in, we sort of rated the Oilers. Now we're rating the Canucks. Like, are we just picking a team every year? Next year, Tree's going to be like, Winnipeg this year. Let's do it.
Going to Winnipeg. Yes.
That's what you tell the guy who's leaving town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been traded. Where am I going, Coach? Going to Winnipeg.
Going to Winnipeg. Yes. Who still doesn't have the airport. But maybe, Dan, let's start there. How did you feel about the Markstrom signing, the Tanev signing, those two big ones, and some of the other little ones, which included Josh Levo, Dominique Simone, Joaquin Nordstrom, Alex Petrovic.
Some depth guys.
Well,
let's start with the big ones. And I think that the Flames for years have been trying to find, since Kipper left, their number one goalie. And they're one of the few teams in the league that's been a playoff team as often as they have without really having that position shored up. And I definitely think that the goaltending position in the NHL has changed. You don't have the number one guy who plays 70 games anymore. But I think the Calgary Flames had brought David Rittich in. I mean, we remember the days of, Kari Ramo and various backups there and Elliott and all these guys they've tried and didn't work. And I think that Markstrom is the right guy. Markstrom is a proven number one. I think they paid better than market value for him. I don't know what you guys think on that, but they got better than market value. And I think he can now be the number one, and that's a guy you can build around. And I think that this really cements David Rittich as a number two, which I think is what he is. I don't think he's ever shown that he can be a number one, but he's a good number two. So I'm really happy with that move. My only worry on Markstrom is he's 30, and it's very possible his best years could be behind him. We could be getting a goalie on the downswing. I'm not saying that's true. I haven't seen him play enough, but I'm hoping he's still got 2-3 really good years in him. I won't talk about the rest of the goalie position. You want to talk about the acquisition. So I'm really happy with Markstrom. I think Tanev was a good deal. I think Tanev brings some things that we need on this team. And, he's a right shot. This team wanted some right shot defensemen. I think he's a better replacement for the pieces that left with Brody, with Hamonic at a better price than you probably would have got Brody back for. So I really like that. I think he's a guy that can be a number one, or not number one, but first pairing. He can be second pairing. And you know what? We've got a lot of young defensemen. If you look at our core, we've got a lot of young guys. So a 31-year-old defenseman with some experience is exactly what this team needs. You'd also mentioned Josh Levo. I think Levo could be a wild card here. I think Levo's a guy who you could see jump into the top six. I could even see him playing on what we would call the number one line this year for a little bit on the right wing, because he can play all three positions. And I think this is a guy that the coaches might lean on heavily. And I can see this year Josh Levo having a career year. He's not obviously going to get Kachuk numbers or, Gaudreau numbers, but I can see him having a career year and forcing the Flames to make some hard decisions with other roster players down the road. As far as Nordstrom and some of those other guys, you know what? They're good depth players. And especially this year, I think depth is going to be important. You're going to have a lot of travel. You're going to have a lot of games back-to-back. I think the bottom six for any team is going to be very fluid. And I think this year just having bodies is going to be so important.
Let's go back to the goaltending, because it sounds like you had a few issues there. One of my training camp storylines was David Rittich. And to me right now, he's sort of in a lame duck position. He's in the final year of his contract. He's not going to be number one. He was put in a situation when we were last in the playoffs that was awkward. But he's going to be needed this year. So what are we expecting from Rittich and goaltending other than Markstrom this year? Because certainly we'll need more than Markstrom to get through the season as well.
Anytime somebody talks about David Rittich, I remind people he's played 115 NHL games. This guy's played less than 2 full seasons. I mean, this is not an experienced NHL goalie. And this is not a goalie who's really gone through a season without injury. Every year he seems to get hurt somewhere. So what do I expect from him? I think he's going to be the number 2. I think you'll see a lot of him in back-to-back games. But I also think he's probably being told, guess who else we've got? Louis Domingue, who's capable of being a number 2. So, David, you've got to stay on your game. And Rittich plays best when he's challenged, when he's had another goalie behind him who's good, whether it was, Mike Smith for a year, the goaltending tandem we had last year was decent, but he's always played better when there's somebody behind him who could challenge for that position. I think you'll see him get quite a few starts, especially with the seasons that we have, but I think you could easily see him lose his spot to Domingue. And you were mentioning the last year of his contract, Kevin. I don't think he's back.
But I guess that makes this a lame duck situation, though.
Yep.
That's the one concern.
Well, it does make it a lame duck, but it also makes it, play for a job somewhere, right? I mean, we have so many goalies in the league right now. And, I mean, you look at guys like Louis Domingue and some of the goalies, they're still being signed to PTOs. There's so many guys looking for a goalie spot. I don't think he wants to go back home. I don't think he wants to go to the AHL. So even if not with Calgary, I mean, how many guys do we see play great in there last year just to move somewhere else? And with a new team coming in next year, there's 2 more jobs for goaltenders in the league that there aren't right now. I would say if I was David Rittich, I'm playing to try and get a job with the Kraken. So I think goaltenders have a value during the season too. There's always somebody who loses their backup, and you can flip yours for a third. And I can see the Flames doing something like that with Rittich as well. But I think that experiment's over. And yeah, he's lame duck, but I think he'll land on his feet if he has an okay season.
I don't like that term for a goaltender or a player at all, because it's a contract year and you're playing for your job. It's not like it's not like a coach or a GM where you can really hinder the development and of the team. They're just playing the game. And I think that it's actually a bonus for the Flames that he's on a contract year, because he's going to, as Dan said, Rittich is going to be playing for a job, playing to prove that he can be a good tandem goaltender going into the 21-22 season, whether it's with Seattle or somewhere else, because as Dan said, there's two more jobs coming into this league after this season, and there's still a lot of goaltenders looking to prove themselves. So I think it's a good thing for the Flames that they have David Rittich on a contract year, trying to prove himself, trying to show them that maybe they shouldn't have spent $6 million a year for 6 years on Jacob Markstrom, and they should have bet on him.
So, Kevin, you were mentioning the lame duck thing. Let me pose a bit of a scenario to you. So, Rittich's on his last year at 2.7, and previously we had 2 goaltenders, him and Talbot, making about the same. I don't think you can bring him back next year to raise. You can't bring him back and pay him $3 with a $6 million goalie. But the Flames also don't really have another guy ready for the NHL, right? I mean, Wolf's not there yet. Arguable if Parsons is. I think he needs some more seasoning. But I think now you can take some more time finding the next guy. So when you're saying Rittich's a lame duck, would you bring Rittich back for $1.5 million? I probably would. So I think the question there becomes, how much is he willing to go down? And even if he's got to go on July 1st, or I don't know if it will be July 1st, but let's call it July 1st still, free agency day. He looks around, nobody's willing to give him the money. But you know what? At $1.5 million, I'd bring him back. So I don't know if he is a lame duck. I think it's, as was mentioned, proving if he can still do this or not as a number 2. And there's some guys that can't do number 2, right? They need those minutes to be effective. So it'll be interesting to see what Rittich looks like coming in with number 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's fair. I just, I guess, just looking back where I was coming from, looking back on how the season ended, that Ward pulled Talbot put Rittich in an awkward position. That I don't know where that is, but he's got to be a professional and he's got to step up, and he's got opportunities there for sure. So, and you know what? I mean, it's been a long off season. I'm hoping that if there's been any animosity between him and Ward, it's been dealt with. And if not, you know what? We can put Louis Domingue in. I mean, he's making $700,000. But I think right now, Domingue and Rittich as a backup, I'm not sure there's a clear-cut winner there. We'll see how the other thing
with that is that the Flames do need to sign a goaltender to exposed in for Seattle and the draft in leading up to that. They've got Rittich is a UFA, Parsons is an RFA, Domingue is a UFA, and Zagadulin is not eligible to be exposed. So they definitely need to sign someone.
Remember last time we signed some guy who didn't even play AHL minutes just to sign him.
Exactly. So it might be that way. They might end up signing a Domingue or even bringing back Rittich if they can find the price, if the price is right. But it's my big question about Rittich this year is, can he stay healthy? Because again, we haven't really seen a healthy season from him yet, and that's why I think he's had to be a tandem goalie. The Flames have wanted him when he first came in to take the number 1 minutes, and he's always had to succeed the minutes because either A, he got too frustrated,
or B, he got hurt, or both. And I think the question is going to be playing limited minutes. Can he play backup minutes and stay healthy? But I don't know about you guys. I feel better with Domingue waiting in the wings if he gets hurt than Zagadulin waiting in the wings if he gets hurt.
Domingue is, and it can throw defense for a loop. Is he's a right-handed catching goalie that seems to throw some defensemen for a loop, especially when you're trying to plan out defensive zone strategies. But I think Rittich will be a solid backup /1B or however they end up playing the splitting the games for the Flames for this year. And he might even
at $6 million. I don't think you're going to see a 1A 1B scenario. I think you see a starter backup.
It's with the 56 games in such in a shorter time. I think you have to look at playing your backup a little bit more than you would normally in a season. So
see what I think you have is I think you have a starter and then a 2A 2B. I think you'll just see Domingue and Rittich sort of swapping those backup minutes.
How many games do you think Markstrom plays?
How many do we have? 56?
Yeah.
If they're going to be going to the playoffs, I would say 40. And I think once you clinch, you let the other two guys get a lot of net time because if they lose Markstrom, I'm not convinced we can go to the playoffs with a Rittich-Domingue pairing and make it out of the first round finally. So I think you play Markstrom until you clinch. But it also, I'd say 40, 42 maybe. That's the thing, right? A good starter should be able to play 60 games. A good starter should be able to play all those games, but the season looks so different in terms of dates and, back-to-backs and that sort of thing. So I think you'll see guys that get frustrated because they're not playing more. And I think that could be the story is, does he get frustrated because he's not playing more than 45?
Yeah, that's fair.
But like I'm looking here, we got lots of back-to-backs like Edmonton, Ottawa. That's a long trip between Edmonton and Ottawa, back-to-back. So, he's going to need a rest. And I think that'll be the question is, can the new goalie coach help him get that through his head?
Yeah. And that was the other thing is what are your thoughts on the goaltending department that they've done now? They brought in Jason LaBarba to be the coach and Jordan Sigalet is sort of the CEO of goaltending. My words, not theirs, but what are your thoughts on
goaltending, Kevin?
Director of goaltending. I couldn't remember what it was, so that's why I went CEO. I needed something of authority.
He's the GEO, the goaltender. The GEO, right? What was it? The goaltending executive officer.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea, and I think that the Flames have been behind on. The Flames have often been behind on goaltending. I mean, even during the '90s, they didn't often have a dedicated goaltending coach. They had a goaltending consultant. There's a lot of teams that we've seen that have this same setup, and I think Sigalet is he's a great goaltending coach to work with young guys. I see him a lot at the rookie camps, talking to the young guys, working with the young guys. I'm not sure how well he's doing with those two guys that we have on the roster here. And I think Sunzi gets bogged down with those two and doesn't get to branch out. So I like this idea that, Sigalet's a guy they obviously like. They've kept him around for a while, but I think LaBarbera has maybe – I don't know why him specifically, if he has some knowledge of these goalies or a friend of them or just the best guy available, but I like the idea, and I think it's going to give us more pieces we can move in and out of that goaltending department as needed with one guy who's saying every goalie in our system, whether they're Calgary, Stockton, Kansas City, the Dub, college, we want them working on these things in this type of game. Right. And that's one thing I think we didn't have before.
I consistently throughout. Yeah.
We talked so much about Devin Levi over the World Juniors. We didn't really talk about how the fact that I wonder how much of an impact Jason LaBarbera had on Devin Levi because he was the goaltending coach for Team Canada for that tournament before taking on this role with the Flames.
And we were talking before we went on the air today about how, there's a lot of coaches that are coaching that have really not had a lot of professional success. We were talking about, look at the great one as a coach, right? Now Daniel Tkachuk is coming in as a coach. He'll probably be a great coach. You see a guy like Bob Bugner, I wouldn't say is an NHL star, but a really good coach. And when I'm looking at a coach for my NHL goalies, who do you think is better to coach NHL goalies, Sigalet or LaBarbera? Like LaBarbera's been in the NHL since pretty much 2,000 consistently. You know, and I think he has a better idea of the NHL game and the NHL goaltender.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Siglet had some coffee in the NHL, but he was sent back up and down a lot. And I think he can help the AHL guys with some of that mental part of what does it take to come up, that sort of thing. And he has a good overall look at the game, but I'm not sure he has the experience to be an NHL goalie coach.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And LeBarber he's recently out. He's not.
Yeah, his last season was 15-16 with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the AHL. His last NHL season was 14-15 in Anaheim, where he played 5 games. But pretty much from 2007 to 2014, he had an NHL job.
Yeah, so I think he can relate to these players.
Yeah. And he's been here for a while. I think a lot of this, too, is he's been coaching with the Hitmen. Not a lot of people know, but he's been with the Hitmen since 16-17 season. So it's not like they had to bring a guy in. He was already here. He was already in Calgary. And I think it's an easy transition. And I think
that's probably why they went that way, is because
that's part of it. And I also think, we still don't know what the WHL season is going to look like and how many coaches they might have. And I think part of it was also, let's hire him so somebody else doesn't snipe him.
Well, it looks like they're going to have 23 games or 24 games, and it's starting in middle of February now. So,
but that's the thing is another NHL team might look at that and go, "Hey, he's only doing 23. Let's snipe him." I think part of this was we value him. Let's sign him so nobody else does.
Yeah. Good pickup there. Let's move up to defense. Who is the ideal defense partner for Chris Tanev?
I'd say Gio.
Ooh, the old man pairing.
The old man yelling at the clouds.
The way I look at it is, I don't think that's the right pair. I think you split them up. I think because you need the foot speed, and both of them are on the back end of their careers, and they aren't as fleet of foot as they used to be. And you gotta split them up and find and give that experience throughout the lineup as well. I think for Tanev, I think it's either Hanifin to give Hanifin an upgrade on Hamonic, and with the same type of pairing where he can maybe release and Hanifin can be more offensive. Or you give Tanev a look with like a Valamaki and see what Valamaki can do in that situation.
I think you've really only got two possible pairings. It's either Giordano Anderson and Tanev Hanifin, or Giordano Tanev Hanifin Anderson. Like, I think you've got your top 4 established. It's just a matter of moving those pieces around. I know a lot of people are really high on Anderson. I am too, but I'm not sold that he's our number 2 guy yet. He's still a young player in this league. Hanifin has been a number 1 guy, and I think you either move Hanifin up with Gio, and then you've got a little bit more offensive talent there, and you tell Hanifin, like you were just saying, you're the offensive guy on this line, and then Anderson. Tanev's the defensively responsible guy, and Anderson is the, sort of more the offensive guy. But I also think that we saw really good chemistry from Hanifin and Anderson in the playoffs last year. And I'm not sure I want to break them up yet. Like, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think I would start the season Gio Tanev, because that they're going to get the job done, and then wait and see how things shake out. And one thing I think the Flames have done too much is relied on Gio on special teams. I would have no problem with Giordano Tanev as our 5-on-5 pairs, and then give some of those other guys more minutes on the special team because they're younger, they need the time, that sort of thing.
Yeah, one of the issues that I foresee with when you started talking about Giordano, Hanifin, and Anderson and Tanev is that you've got 2 left shots and 2 right shots on those pairs, and I think there's a better way to spread it out with whether you do go with the old man pair of Gio and Tanev, and then you've got your Anderson and Hanifin, or you swap Anderson and Tanev to make it better.
Anderson and Tanev are both right-handers, so you can kind of swap those two. So it'd either be Gio Anderson, which would give you Hanifin Tanev, or vice versa.
And then, as we talked about, depth is so key. So depending on how comfortable they feel with Nesterov and how comfortable they feel with Valamaki, are they comfortable with them being a pair while loading up that top four?
And as fans, we often want to see the hot kid on our team, right? And that's Valamaki right now. But I still question, is Valamaki better to play in Calgary with third pairing minutes or to play in Stockton with first pairing minutes? This is a guy who, again, has never been healthy for a whole season yet. We've barely seen this guy play. I'm not sure I'm ready to bring him to Calgary. He just had a great season playing against men overseas. If it was me, I would start him in Stockton and give him first pair minutes to see what he does. I would leave those depth pairings to Nesterov, to Shillington, to some of the guys that we've brought up recently, Petrovic, and let Valamaki come up when we need him, when a top four injury happens.
That is a good point. I mean, I think we're all, and he's coming off an injury. Yes, he had the year in Finland, but still NHL is NHL, and that's everything else. I mean, from what I saw of the scrimmage, the highlights that I saw, Nesterov and Valamaki looked good together. But at the same time, I do see your point of allowing Valamaki. It's half a season where it's not going to be. It's not like if it was an 84-game season, then I would be like, okay, I think really at some point you're going to need to bring Valamaki up. And
I'm not saying don't bring him up, but when we submit our opening day roster, I would rather put him in Stockton and say, you know what, you had a hell of a year against men. Let's reward you by giving you a number 1, number 2 role in Stockton. Then, hey kid, you're the number 5 here in Calgary. And I think he'll come up. I mean, I think he will be back here at some point when there's a top 4 injury. But I think we have so much depth. I'd be okay with Nesterov and Petrovic, Nesterov and Shillington. I mean, there's enough guys that can fill a 5-6 role.
Yeah.
And if he's busting down the door, I don't know what the call-up rules are going to look like this year, because you can't just bring a guy from the States to Canada without quarantining. So I don't know what that's going to look like. But, if he busts down the door and earns a spot, bring him back.
I think they still have to quarantine for 14 days. If not, it's 7. And that's why they have the taxi squads that they're gonna have to have filled up. And honestly, for me, I think I keep Valamaki on in this top 6. And maybe I'm coming at it from a Canucks fan standpoint, where I look at how it looks like how the Canucks handled last year and how the Canucks look like they're going to be handling their top 6 this year, where they aren't necessarily loading up the top 4 with the quote unquote best 4 defensemen. They're bringing down one of their top 4 defensemen into the third pair, and mixing and matching throughout the game based off of the situation, and having a steadying force on that third pair with a rookie like Valamaki, and in the Canucks case, it looks like they're going to have Tyler Myers and Ole Levy as the quote unquote third pair. And then you're getting that veteran's getting extra minutes on penalty kill and or power play to make up for the lack of minutes on 5-on-5 potentially. And I think that in a season where it is so weird in terms of scheduling and compressed in certain areas, and it's going to get more compressed, and you're going to have more off time as well, because we're already seeing with Dallas they're postponing their first 3 games. I expect more. I expect a few more of those situations to happen, just because of the reality we're in. You're going to want to be able to have that depth. You're going to want to be able to have the ability to have.
But also, reason you want to have veteran depth,
right?
And he's not. And I guess this whole thing brings up an interesting question too, which what do we do with Shillington? I mean, do you look at Shillington as being part of the taxi squad? Is it good for his development to sit around, or do you send him to Stockton and leave that spot to Petrovic and guys like that?
That's going to be really fun to watch over the next 2-3 days, to try and to see what teams do with the younger players who are on the cusp. The Flames have Valamaki that they have, and Shillington that have to. Do you want them sitting and not playing, or do you want them playing and really have to be in a really tough position to actually bring them up?
And that's why I mentioned the quarantine. We can't just bring these guys up and down at will. There has to be more strategic thought to when you move them.
Mm-hmm. And that's the discussion. It's not as straightforward as, well, he needs playing time, so therefore we're going to send him down. But if he's right there, and I think Valamaki is right there pushing for more, he will be pushing for more ice time real quickly out of the gate. Then I think it makes more sense to keep him up and tell him, look, yeah, you're starting on the third pair, but there are opportunities to get more ice time, whether it's on the penalty kill, whether it's moving up the lineup to take some ice time away from Giordano because of his age. Like, there's opportunities there.
I know a lot of people are really high on Valamaki. Sorry, Kevin, I know you're going to say something there, but I just wanted to finish this thought. I know a lot of people are high on him, and I think he has potential. But to me, I can't look at him as a top 4 prospect until I see a season of healthy hockey. Like, I think this could be, and every team gets them once in a while. You make a draft pick who looks good, and the guy's just never healthy. And I'm hoping that's not the case with Valley. I hope that we can see him get healthy and stay healthy. But we've all seen it in every team, a guy that's drafted high and just never makes it because he's not healthy.
I think one of my criticisms of the Flames D overall is sort of, without Valamaki, I do feel that they're slow. They're slower. I think Valamaki adds some speed, but
But do you need speed for 6 minutes a night?
I don't think he's playing as low as 6 minutes a night, though.
Well, maybe here's the question. Where are you at with Hanifin?
I think Hanifin's got a ton of potential. A lot of people forget how young Hanifin is because he's been around the league for so long. Noah Hanifin is only 23 years old. I think he's got great potential still, and I don't think I would not put Valley higher than Hanifin in the lineup right now.
Okay. So really,
I think it could happen during the season, but starting the season, I think Hanifin's near top 4.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, if that's your argument, it's hard for me to keep Valamaki in for 6 minutes. I guess then it comes down to Valamaki and Shillington. I do like what I've seen from Nesterov. I think I know it seems like the Flames are higher on Nesterov, playing the right side. And this may be a hot take, but I do think that this is an upgrade. I think Tanev is definitely an upgrade for Hamonic. The question is Nesterov an upgrade for what Gustafsson and Forbert were?
You were mentioning Hanifin, and we're paying this guy almost $5 million for a team that has less than $1 million salary cap. If you find that Valamaki is going to play higher in the lineup, I think you got to find a way to move that deal, because $5 million for a third pair guy is more than this team's going to want to pay. And if for no other reason, that's why I think they're going to give him every chance they can in the top 4. The other thing I always caution fans about is fans often look at defensemen as being good or not based on offensive performance. That's not their job. Their job is to defend, hence the name. And I think a lot of times guys that are stay-at-home defensemen or don't have the same offensive prowess don't get looked at as good defensemen by a lot of fans because they're not putting up the goals and the assists. I think Hanifin's just fine in his role, and I think at 23, I'd be okay to keep this guy till the end of his contract and see what we got out of him. But I think he's a top 4.
Okay.
I don't think he's a top 2 yet, which is, I think, how they're trying to play him in Carolina a lot. But I think he's a great top 4 guy.
Okay. That's fair. So basically you're going Tanev, Gio, Anderson, Hanifin, Nesterov, Shillington?
I think I would swap Shillington with Petrovic kind of as needed. I think Shillington, I don't think his potential is much more than a 5'6" at this point. So, yeah, I would start with Shillington and Petrovic as sort of your 5'6" guys and let them rotate out with Nesterov, those bottom 3.
Fair. Let's move to forwards. So, clearly, so far, I'm not saying that this is going to stay forever, but they have gone Lindholm at center. And they've done maybe they listened to us in the off season when we said we'd like to see some Lindholm, Dubé, Tkachuk, or Lindholm, Dubé, Mangiapane, or Tkachuk. Do you like Lindholm at center? Is this?
It wasn't just you guys that were saying that, and the coach has been saying that all off season. He was even saying that last year he wanted to get Lindholm to center, so he had that goal. Do I like him at center? Yeah, I think. he's a right winger. We're short on right wingers, so I think we needed him there. But I think he's just as good as center. I'd be fine to start him there.
Yeah, my only issue is that the Flames are super thin on the right side. Right now, it looks like they've got on the top two lines. Your right wingers are Dominic Simone and Josh Levo, and I think you're okay going into a season with your top six forwards, have your top six right wingers be including one of them. But if you got both of them, that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of any sort of what you're adding there.
Yeah.
You've got some good, really good players that they're playing with Johnny and Monty, and then Tkachuk and Lindholm. But you look around, especially you look around this division. Like there's some big, heavy hit, like highly skilled lines around this division, and are they going to be able to keep up and be able to go tit for tat with those lines throughout on this season? And it remains to be seen. But I think eventually, they may have to move him back just as a nuclear option against teams that have like full on top, like ridiculously good top lines, like Vancouver with the Lotto line, Edmonton with McDavid or Draisaitl. You've got Winnipeg with their top line. You have Toronto with their top line. Like, I don't
know. For me, what I like about Josh Levo with Monahan and Gaudreau is he sort of reminds me a little bit, not fully, but a little bit of Michael Perlin, where I think he's going to create some room for Gaudreau to do some things. I think that was one of the reasons they were trying Lucic there for a time, but Lucic couldn't skate with them. But I think that's one of the things that creates some space for Gaudreau. You forgot Mandra Mangiapane, which I do think is going to be in the top six for most of the year. The question then comes,
well, if he's going to be in there, who's coming out?
Well, that's the question. And it's then you go back, I guess, do you want Backlund at center and Bennett on the wing, or?
I wouldn't move. Backlund has never looked good on the wing. Bennett's looked better on the wing. So if I have to put those guys in, I leave Backlund at center and Bennett on the wing.
Fair. So then you go, is it Backlund, Bennett, Dubé?
If it was me, so just going back to the Lindholm thing, I think there's also a lot of pressure from fans in the media on your number one center. Your number one center is expected to be your guy who's getting 80 points. And I think this year, if we look at the top six, it's going to be by committee. And I think Lindholm might get crapped on a little bit because of that. He's not going to be that guy who's going to go and get us 1,000,000 points and all that. But what I think that Dominic Simon is up there because they want to see what they've got. I think by the time we get into the heat of the season, usually I'd say Christmas time, but whatever that is, February this year, I think you'll end up seeing Tkachuk, Lindholm, Dubé as your first line. I think your second line will be Gaudreau, Monahan, Levo. So I think Dubé will move up into that because he's a right winger, and I think he's a better right winger than Simone is to be with those top guys. So I think you'll see Dubé moved up there. I'm not saying he's ready to be a first-line guy, but of the options available, I think he's the guy I'd put up there if they want to leave Lindholm as a center.
Yeah, the thing with the Flames is they don't have they're thin on. They've got guys who can play the right wing, but they're all left shot. They're quite thin on right shot right wingers, and you can go a little overboard on valuing what way a player shoots. Mm-hmm. Skill for the most part will override that, but if you can, that's why I think Josh Levo is such a great signing. Is he is someone he's a right shot guy. He's got some underrated offensive skill. He is good at going into the dirty areas. I don't think he's going to create the space that Kevin is saying, but he's still a good grinder. But he's not going to go out and create that space the way Ferland was able to when he had his big season here in Calgary and with Carolina.
If I want a guy in right wing who's going to create space, I would actually put Bennett with Gaudreau and Monahan. So, I mean, if it was me, if I was the coach, I'd shake these up a little bit. I think you need I think on your top two lines, if we look at these top two lines of the Flames, top two offensive lines, I think you need some sandpaper on both. You've got it on what's now the first line with Tkachuk and Lindholm. If it was me, I'd put Tkachuk on the left, Lindholm on the right, and Monahan down the middle. I think you get a little bit of everything there. Then on the second line, I would have Gaudreau, Backlund, and Bennett. I think that we've tried the Gaudreau-Monahan experiment. I don't know if it's just that they're not working well together or they're really not first-line guys, which we talked about on our show last year. I question if Monahan is your number one center. But I think that breaking those guys up gives you a little better line combinations throughout the top two.
They both produce at top line rates. Gaudreau is a legit top line winger. Saying otherwise is
Gaudreau is. I'm not sure Monahan's a top line center.
But Monahan's one of those guys who, I wonder if he is. He needs a little more sheltered minutes to produce. He's really good down below like everyone knows, he's really good down below the dots, just below the once they're playing the half court possession game, down cycling in down low in the zone. But once the game gets quick and fast and starts becomes more of a track meet, that's when you lose him. And they need to make sure that he's on a line with some quick players that can compensate for that.
And I think, again, where a lot of fans overestimate Dubé. We've seen 1.5 good seasons from this kid. I'm not saying he's not there, but I'm not sure he's number one right wing yet. I think putting him and Mangiapane in the bottom six and letting them play their way up is the right way to start looking at this lineup. For me, Mangiapane has proven to be a top six already.
But
he's a left winger, so is he better than Gaudreau and is he better than Tkachuk?
No, but he would fit. I think he would fit on the right side where they've played him already.
Yeah, potentially. So where do you put Mangiapane then? With Tkachuk Lindholm or with Gaudreau Monahan?
With Tkachuk Lindholm.
So you think he's your number one right wing guy? I think he might be a little out of his
winger. No. Is he a number one right winger on this team? Yes.
I just think he might be a little over his head playing with those guys and playing that many minutes against the players he'd be playing against.
And this is exactly why I have that concern for the Flames is they don't have, like, you look at Vancouver, they've got Brock Boeser as their number one right winger. And then they're testing out Hoglander on the second line. And then they've got two really good left wingers in JT Miller and Tanner Pearson, who are legit top six forwards. In Edmonton, they've got it's a little bit different, but they've got the two absolute stud centers that can make up for a lack of like full dot, like for sure top six wingers, but they're still the ones they have are quite close.
I think you've either got to start Mangiapane as bottom six, or, and I mean, this is and I don't know if we want to go down this road, but you've got a lot of depth on. What's that?
Let's go down the road.
We've got a lot of depth on the left, and as was mentioned earlier, Gaudreau is a number one left winger, but it looks like he's been relegated number two. Is there value to try and get something on the right for him? Is it time to say, you know what, Tkachuk is our number one guy. Let's move Gaudreau and get a top right winger for him.
Can I throw a scenario out?
Sure.
I'm going to throw it. Maybe this is hot take. This is ridiculous. Gaudreau for lining.
So I say we're going to Winnipeg.
We're going to Winnipeg.
And as an American kid, I don't know if he'd get the reference. I gotta say that to a Canadian kid. He'd just think, well, yeah, coach, that's where the team plays.
American for a finish, and they're not going to get that reference.
That's right.
Oh,
I think that could work. And, I also think you don't necessarily need to move Gaudreau for a top right winger. I think you can move him for somebody else's second line right winger and a prospect and let that guy, you wouldn't have looked at Lindholm as a top line right winger where he was, right? He was sort of a second line, sort of middle guy, but he's stepped up. And we even saw that with a guy like Jari Hudler when the Flames acquired him. Like, I think you can send Gaudreau for somebody's second line right winger and a pick or a prospect or something like that. And I think that would be my preference. But yeah, I think line A could be if you want to, but it just, when I look at the right hand or the left hand side of this team, there's too much depth there. And is Gaudreau going to want to be here? And also, do we want to pay him to be on the second line for that much money? Or the other thing is, do we trade Monahan and get a right winger? Like, if we're all saying he's a number two center, I would argue so is Backlund. And I think that if you're paying Monahan as your number 2 and Backlund $5 million to be your number 3, you can make an argument maybe one of those guys should move as well. But I think the easiest piece to move would be Gaudreau. Not saying I want to do it, but I think it's a conversation that has to be had. If Tkachuk is our number 1 left winger, you either try to convert Gaudreau to right, which I think is a terrible idea, or you see if there's value there.
Yeah, because there's not enough balance in this lineup, in my opinion. You've got 2 number 1 left wingers. You've got Tkachuk and Gaudreau,
exactly.
But you've got 3 second-line centers.
Yeah.
And
not only that, in the current – sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, and you don't have a top 6 right winger. Like, yeah, Lindholm could turn into a 1C, but he has to prove it. He hasn't been given the time to prove it. He needs to prove it.
Exactly.
So when you've got 2, like I said, 3 second line centers and 2 first line left wingers and nothing on the right side, you need to find a way to balance that out.
Exactly. And, also show me a guy who's a legitimate first-line left winger right now who's making less than $7 million. We're in a weird cap era. I think the Flames could get a huge deal done because he's cap-friendly. If I go to a GM and say, I can get you a top-line winger for less than $7 million, I think you could get more value for that than other teams. We go, great, call those guys. It'll cost you $11 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think that contract is one of the most movable top-line contracts as well, which in the current era could bode well for the Flames. Here's a name I've thrown out on our show. If you want to get a right winger, do you try to make a deal with the Flyers and bring in Konechny and something?
I don't think the Flyers do that because I don't think Gaudreau matches their style, and Konechny still has another level to go to and is younger. I think you have to look at someone who's not quite at the level that Konechny's at, and then hope that he grows. If you're going to go that route, it's the right idea. It's just the wrong target player.
Or a guy who's falling off a little bit, and do we go a little bit older for veteran experience?
Mm-hmm.
We had a guy who wrote into our show last year with an email, and he suggested making a deal with the Islanders for Eberle. I mean, Eberle's a little bit older, has some veteran experience, but you get Eberle plus something.
I personally like Jordan Eberle. I think he's a good right winger. Is he a top 6?
And if we would have brought in Hull over the summer, we could have reunited Hull and Eberle.
Yes, I would have been something. I would have to be.
Is Eberle a top 6? I think Eberle's more top 6 than Dylan Dubé. I think Eberle's more top 6 than Mangiapane. At least he's been around the league. And if you look at playoff teams, you got to stack him with some vets sometimes. I think Eberle is top 6 if he's with Tkachuk, Lindholm. Like, he doesn't need to be your scoring guy, but he can be a good puck mover for those guys. Or Gaudreau, Monahan.
I feel like
50 point winger, Kev. That's top 6.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to be your star, but 50-point winger. I mean, and if I look at the makeup of Tkachuk, Lindholm, Eberle, I like that makeup. And then your second line would become Mangiapane, Monahan, and Levo. That's not a bad line either. Or even Mangiapane, Monahan, and Bennett is not a bad line either.
Yeah, Eberle's had one season where he hasn't been at least at least a 40-point pace.
I think we don't see a lot of him because he's playing on the island, but he's still doing pretty well. And arguably, the Islanders don't have a great team and haven't for a number of years. So for him to be getting 50 points in the island is also pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Right now, the best option for the Flames is what you said, Kev. It's Mangiapane. If they go into the season with Levo and Mangiapane as their right wingers, I mean that's better than what they're currently going at, and it's got some potential. And you go
into the season with it, but the question is, do we end the season with it? And this is what we talk about a lot on our show, right? Is this the line, or is this this will work until we get something else done?
And it's so tough to make trades again because of quarantining and everything. Because
I wouldn't be surprised if you see that teams are making a lot of trades just within their division.
Yep. Basically, let's look at Ottawa and what are available there.
Let me throw two other names out at you as potential options. I'm not saying this will happen. Brendan Gallagher.
He just signed.
Yeah, that's the one thing, but
he just signed. Like they're not moving. They're dead. Montreal's in a go for it mode too. Like in this, unless they go right off the rails, and those two young centers do not take that next step, and they can't make it into. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're gonna battle it till the bitter end, and even then, I think the price of Gallagher is going to be more than we'd want to pay. I think it'd be more than Gaudreau. That's a valuable contract. Even then, like you're looking at, they'd only be selling off the potential free agents, and if that's the case, then there's another player on Montreal that you go after. Well, actually, two, Thomas Tatar.
That was the other.
He's a left shot, but he's got the shooting. He's got the ability to shoot. Matt, can he move over to the right wing? And Joel Armia, because Montreal is actually quite deep on the right side. Mm-hmm. They're actually playing Tyler Toffoli on the left side right now in camp. So they've got depth there, and if there is something there, then why?
Toffoli was a guy who suggested the Flames went after last year at the deadline, and I think if you're going to make a deal with Montreal, like you said, they are quite deep. I would even go after Toffoli. I think he could be a top 6 right winger for the Flames, and he's on a decent contract as well.
Although that'd be hard for them to trade someone they just signed as a UFA.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's easier than trading Gallagher.
Yeah.
I think if you really want to make that deal and you're looking for a right winger in Canada, I think you've honestly either got to look at I think the best option is probably trying to get something done with Toronto.
William Nylander?
I don't think they would do Nylander. I think they overvalue Nylander, but I'd do that.
So Toronto would be it's not Nylander. They're not trading Marner because I think they really value Marner. And I think it is Nylander. That's the best option unless you're going a little bit farther down and going for a left shot guy who can play at both wings.
But I don't think you can trade, say, Gaudreau for a guy much lower than someone else's second line unless it's a big package. Like if we're trying to bring in a top line right winger, I don't think you can do that. I mean, the only other Canadian guy I would go for, and again, I don't think they want to move him, but if you want to go a little bit younger, is you do Gaudreau for Virtanen and something. But I don't think Vancouver wants to get rid of him.
No, and I don't think Vancouver would be willing to take on that because Gaudreau's cap is like $675, but he's being paid $675 both years.
Yeah,
they're trying to be Vancouver's very cash strapped right now, and I don't see that being a.
No, I think from a fan perspective, Line A is the way to go because it's the big name for the big name. But I don't know that you get that done. I don't know that there's enough demand for both teams. And I think that Winnipeg can get more for Line A on the open market as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you always deal from a position of strength to address a position of weakness, right? And arguably, we've addressed the goaltending. We don't need to address that. I think the defense is good enough. We don't need to go and make a big splash on D. But right wing is something we need. And I think if you look around at the most valuable piece, it's Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah. And we were talking about this a couple of days ago we were talking about this. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday Monday and Tuesday might be very interesting days for moves and transactions. And we could see, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple of big deals.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the fan in me that wants to see that, but I would not be surprised.
Well, they're going to.
I think this year, big deals you're going to want to get done early because can you imagine if you make a big deal midway through and then it's, we got this guy, but he can't play for a week, and we're in the crunch of a playoff spot. So I think if you're going to see big deals as a GM, I want to get them done now because I'd hate to be, we made a deal at whatever the deadline is. We're fighting for a playoff spot, but we can't bring that guy in for 7 days.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. I don't think there's going to be much quarantine because they're already quarantined in their bubbles. I bet that they will say this guy's already quarantined in a bubble. He can just move to a different bubble. I bet they've worked something out with the governments that way.
I think they still have to do a 7-day is what I think it is. Because even Hamonic, who came in on a PTO for Vancouver, he's still on his quarantine. Like he can't practice with the team until tomorrow.
Yeah, but I don't think he'd been in a bubble before that, though.
Yeah. Any other issues with the Flames that we're missing or not? What are some underutilized stories here?
Well, I think again, I've said it's the taxi squad, and we talked about it a little bit with Valamaki in terms of how you want to use it, because the way the taxi squad works is it's just an extension of the AHL team in terms of transactions. So if a player is waiver eligible to get sent to the taxi squad, they have to go through waivers. And that's why Monday and Tuesday specifically are going to be high volume waiver transactions and maybe some trades to make things work on the rosters for these teams. For me, I think you want to have at least one waiver exempt player on your taxi squad for a forward and a defenseman you have flexibility of moving up and down without having to worry about waiver issues.
Or I think you can also get that, though, by sending a guy like Byron Feroce on waivers who's not going to get claimed, and then he becomes waiver exempt for 30 days.
Yeah, and then you call him up, and then it's like 30 days or stuff. There's going to be
the usual rule with 30 days or 10 games. I don't know if they're changing.
Yeah, 30 days or 10 games is right. But I think there is value of having a waivers exempt, someone who doesn't have to worry about that for the whole season on that.
But I guess the question there becomes: do you make that a top guy like a Luke or like a Matthew Phillips, who he's not waiver exempt, but he's not getting any experience? Or do you make that a guy like a Luke Philippe, who is probably not going to play, but he's waiver exempt?
Exactly. That's the conversations that all these teams are having. Again, going back to what we talked about with Valamaki as a potential. I don't see him being a taxi squad guy at all. I see him either on the full 23-man roster or how many they decide to carry.
Yeah.
Or down in Stockton. But I still see. But that's the decision that they have to make.
Well, let's look at a guy like Shillington then, who's probably on your taxi squad. So is he better sitting out and watching guys play for most of the year? Is he better going to Stockton, right?
Yeah, and you have to play that against are we as a team better with him on a taxi squad as a ability to call up right for whatever reason, as opposed to someone like. Because you're not, I think you're not going to have Connor Mackey on your taxi squad. You're going to want him playing.
And I think for the guys that are going to be taxi squad, they'll be playing a game here and a game there. And we often talk about this: is he good enough to fill the hole? As a guy like Petrovic, he might not be the guy you want in your top six, but is he good enough to fill a hole? Is Buddy Robinson good enough to fill a hole?
And I think those two are going to be on the taxi squad, or especially Petrovic being a right shot defenseman.
Justin Kirkland, again, is he good enough to fill a hole at center when we need it, or is he better off playing in the AHL? And these are all questions that have to be asked. And again, I think as fans, we want to see that waiver-exempt young stud on the team, but sometimes it's better to not see them and have them banished to Stockton, California to get better.
Well, they also have.
I actually found out that in the KHL, they have their own farm league, and they're one of the teams has a farm team in Siberia. So you can actually get banished to Siberia in the KHL.
Oh, can you imagine? Can you imagine? Yeah, geez.
You think going to Stockton is bad?
Well, but at least that's California.
But yeah, and especially right now, where, as we said, I don't know. We need to figure this out in terms of because of that. I think it's 7 days coming up over the border for call-ups, but it's still 7 days, and that's what
it is now. But the league has said that can change based on government restrictions and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at the taxi squad on the forward side, a guy like Ronaldo, he was good enough last year for the few games he played. That's the kind of guy that I think has more value on the taxi squad than has at the AHL level.
Now, my other question is, what do you do with, at least to start the season, with a potential of Connor Zary, who's the WHL is not starting until the middle of February at the earliest now, and they're only going to be playing 24 games. Is he someone that you look at being practicing with the team on the taxi squad until the WHL starts, or do you send him down to Stockton because you can play them in the AHL?
I don't think he's Stockton eligible. He's not 20.
Yeah, no, he until his season starts, until the WHL season starts, those signed teenagers can play in the AHL.
I think, and usually in the NHL, there's a way that you can have a guy travel with the team and practice with the team, but still not be on the roster. I mean, we even saw that a little bit with Valley last year, where he'd go out and work out before the other guys, even when he was quote unquote injured. So I think I would keep Zary with the team just to practice and see what it's like to be an NHLer, but I don't think I'd officially list him on the practice squad. I think, or the B squad, or we want to call them the taxi squad. I think you just find a way to keep him with the team. But again, looking at the depth on this team, where does Zary fit? Why have him on the taxi squad?
Just because it gives him experience practicing with the team, right?
Yeah, and I think there's ways you can still do that.
Up in the middle of February when potentially maybe you'd be able to plan for it, so you'd be able to send him down, call somewhat like you have a space available. Because I'm sure if they're going through that and they're going through the quarantine, they're not counting against they won't be counting against your roster or your taxi squad numbers until they cleared quarantine. So you can call a player up and send Zary to Kamloops once that player's cleared quarantine.
To me, I think, Zary was here for camp. He got the experience of working out as an NHLer. I think I would send him to Stockton now and let him work out with development coaches that are better at developing guys down there.
What about Pelche?
Same thing.
Again, with the lineup space we have, and the other thing I'm worried about is, let's say we have an injury. Do you want to put a guy in his first game in that spot, or do you want to put a Buddy Robinson or a, who else have we got? Buddy Robinson, Byron Ferocci, who what you've got out of them. To me, I'd send Pelche, I'd send Zary down, let them develop, and keep a bunch of more veteran guys on the taxi squad.
Just reading here, it looks like for the training camp, they issued an exemption to the mandatory 14-day quarantine. But I don't see anything in terms of how this is going to work during the regular season.
Like I said, from what I understand, depending on while the player goes through the quarantine, they don't count towards your cap or your roster. And once they clear, that's when they start counting. So if they do decide to keep like Zary or Pelche on with their on the taxi squad and practicing with the team, what they can do is they can then call up someone from Stockton. They go through the 7 or 14-day quarantine, whatever it is, and that person being called up does not end up counting towards those numbers until they clear quarantine. And then once they clear quarantine, then you can send Zary and or Pelche to their respective junior teams.
I'm just looking this up right now. It looks like that's the NHL's plan, but they still, it sounds like, don't have agreement from all 30 governments or however many they need to make that the actual rule yet.
Yeah, because we still haven't. I mean, I know some of us is like, this is no big deal, but we have not heard that man from Manitoba yet that Winnipeg's allowed to play games there yet.
Mm-hmm.
As I said,
and these rules, I think, will change too. And I really don't want to be skirting the rule and having one guy coming up and one guy coming down. And, oh crap, we need a body and we don't have one. Like, I think you don't want to play fast and loose. Let's send this guy down and that guy up, and it takes a week. And oh crap, now we got to put, as Matt likes to say, let's convert a defenseman to a forward because we're out of forwards. Like, I think you're better just find a home and leave him there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that should happen, but I'm just pointing out that has not been done yet.
Yes,
so
that's right.
And as I said, Kevin, the NHL wouldn't be going down this road unless they knew for sure, right?
Well, that's also true.
So, Kevin, do you think we might get the Red Deer Jets for a year?
Can you imagine?
There was talk like Vancouver. There was a lot of Vancouver hand wringing for that at one point. So,
can you imagine if Vancouver had to play in Calgary for the start of the season?
Well, I mean, the deal when the Saddledome flooded was they were going to move to Regina, so I think that's your backup NHL home here if the Jets can't play.
Yeah.
The Regina Jets has a bit of a ring to it, too.
There we go. All right. The final thing that I have, anyway, is expectations. I guess, first of all, do you have them in the playoffs?
This is such a tough conversation to have just because of how close we've talked about this on some of our others, how close all the top 6 teams are.
Exactly. If we were still in the regular division that we were in last year, I would say yes. Do we even know how many Canadian teams are going to make the playoffs? I haven't seen the playoff finalists. Okay, so 4 of the
top
6.
4 from each division make it, and then they play playoffs within the divisions.
I think Calgary will make it. I don't know they'll make it out of round 1.
Yeah.
Are they in the top 2 or bottom 2?
I'd say the middle 2.
Okay,
I don't think they can be number 1. I think you've got a great number of Canadian talents. Really, to me, who makes it in, who doesn't, is about consistency. All 6 of these or 7 of these teams have the ability to make it. It's going to be who can be consistent and whose injuries don't catch up with them.
Yeah, and consistent, not going on long losing streaks, because not when you go on a long losing streak, not only are you going on a long losing streak, you're probably losing 3 or 4 games against one team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's huge too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also going to be the teams that can travel the best, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, when you're the travel, I don't think travel is going to be as big an issue as a regular season because we've got 2-3 games in a city at a time.
Not necessarily the travel itself, but we even saw this in the playoff bubble. These guys are now in a hotel for a week. Yeah. They can't go out to eat, so they're sitting in their room playing Xbox maybe till 4 a.m, and they're not sleeping. Like, I think those are all the things that might go with the travel, because the guys can't just go for dinner probably like they could before. So what's that going to do to them? Not just the actual plane ride, but all the stuff that goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, if I'm in a hotel in Edmonton for a week, I wouldn't be happy. But especially if I can't go anywhere, like, you know, are we playing Xbox till 4 a.m. and not getting our sleep?
Yeah. What was that game again that everyone was upset about?
Fortnite.
Yes.
And it's Warzone's the big one now.
What's that?
Warzone's the big one now. That's what Gaudette played it. I think he's had McEwen and Pedersen streaming with him on for Canucks Eyes. I'm sure Liney's playing it all the time.
You know what I mean? You've got some times here when you're going to be, you've got like 4 or 5 days between games. And again, what are these guys going to do if there's nothing else to do? And I think that's going to be the real question this year. And also the recovery, right? Can you play this many games this close together?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think Calgary can make it. I don't think they're going to be in the bottom 3 this year, but I don't think they make it out of the first. Nothing with this lineup tells me that they are capable of making it out of the first.
I have Calgary in the middle. That's what I'll say. But in terms of what happens in the playoffs, I think that's a few months away.
You were asking Kevin if there's anything else to talk about. I think that we need to address the coaching. I mean, Ward is coming back, but how often has a coach here ever been effective for more than 2 years? When was the last time we had a coach who this team listened to for more than 2 years? And I think this is really, we talked about potentially moving Gaudreau as well earlier. Is it the players tune out the coach, or have we just had lousy coaches? I think if we bring in yet another coach and, you know, the same players are not responding to the coach, at some point you got to say, well, maybe we do need to move those players that are tuning out that coach. But I think a big question too is, I mean, Ward got a lot out of this team last year, but could Peters have got the same? We don't know. So I think the question is Ward the right guy, and is he the right guy for now, or is he the right guy for the long term?
I think he's the right guy for now. I think when they made the change to get Markstrom, to get Tanev, bring some different leadership in, and make some big changes along with that in terms of bringing in a bona fide start number one. I think you had to go with a consistent voice and see what he could do from training camp. Not to mention, I think to see what he does, because I think we talked about this with you guys at the end of the last season, talking about their willingness to spend on coaches.
Yeah,
and
they're simply not.
And him being a cheap option that they know has had some success with this roster.
And Kevin, you were mentioning Riddick being a lame duck goalie earlier. I think you could see the same from Ward. I think the team is beefed up enough. They've got their goalie, all that sort of thing. But if they don't make it to the playoffs, I think Ward again becomes the scapegoat. And I think now you've got to say the pieces are here. Maybe it's time to spend.
Yeah, well, one of the things we talk that is something that has not been talked about. And we brought this up with Montreal. Because remember, Julian had to leave the bubble and Kurt Muller took over. So, and you look back to the last two finalists, the Blues switched from Mike Yof to Craig Berube. The Stars switched from Jim Montgomery to Rick Bowness, and they got to the final. Is that trigger? Our team's going to be trigger happy about this if they're off to a bad start?
All those names you mentioned, experienced NHL coaches, right?
Yeah.
Experienced head coaches. So I think this is the one thing that when you look at the teams that are consistently in the playoffs, rarely do you have a guy who's never been a head coach leading that team. It happens, but it's not as common.
Yeah, I think if you sign him as an interim, I think I'm going to assume he's safe. But at the same time, I will say that in terms of where I rank the Flames in terms of coaching, I don't know if I have them in the top half. Actually, I know I don't have them in the top half. I would say they're probably in the lower half of this division.
And even those rookie coaches that come in that have success, they were a head coach in the A or they were a head coach in the Dub. Like, Ward's pretty much been an assistant in Boston and then an assistant here, associate here, and then head coach. So I think he's a guy who could break out. He could be – there's always that one coach that goes from nobody to very well-known head coach. And Ward could be that guy, but I think it's going to be an underappreciated storyline this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess, they didn't change any of the assistants. It's the same crew. So, I mean, if you're going Ward, if you decide it's, you're basically going to run with this unless you do hire outside. Well,
and that I think is a larger coaching discussion of, I don't think our assistants are great. I mean, Marty Gellin, a nice guy, not a guy you think of as a top assistant. He was sort of given the job because they want him here. I think really if you're going to bring in a new coach, you've got to be willing to have that coach bring in his people. I think Huska's very qualified. Huska's a great assistant coach, but Jelly, I don't know. Ray Edwards, I don't know. LaBarbera, I think, is fine. So I think you've got to bring in a new coach and say, you can gut this team if you want to. Because how often we brought in a new coach into an existing staff? It's just, these are our assistants. We're just going to change the head piece of them. And is it really as effective?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the question. And that is, to me, other than right wing, that is my biggest concern with the Flames is, and I do think that coaching is going to play a huge factor in this. And
I think there's only one more time you can switch coaches before you got to switch I think you're actually out of times, but how often do we say, Gaudreau, Monahan, those guys are fine, it's the coach. Gaudreau, Monahan, those guys are fine, it's the coach. I think they're out of options. I think now if the coaching doesn't work, you can't just switch the coach and make it better. I think you've now got to start looking at moving the pieces.
Yeah.
Ward is good enough. He should be able to get – I like Ward as a coach. I think he's a good enough coach. It's not like he's, a peewee coach they brought in. He's good enough. He has the pedigree. He should get good results out of this team. So if not, I don't think we can blame it on the coaching.
Yeah. Just I would put Maurice, Green, Julian, and – ahead of him for sure.
But again, if these players tune out every coach that they're working with, maybe it doesn't matter who's in there. I mean, maybe again, you've got to know the players that are tuning them out and then change to the right coach.
Yeah. And I guess the other storyline here, and we did talk about it in the off season, is this the last year that Gio's the captain?
I think Gio's the captain as long as he's a Flame.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's signed for 2 more years, so I think we're looking at 2 more years for sure. Unless he steps aside on his own volition and hands it over to, say, Tkachuk, because I think that's where everyone thinks it's going, to do that. But it's going to have to be on his own volition and to make that happen. And when do we rarely see that. We rarely see that actually happen.
I also question the value of it. I mean, your captain should be your leader. Your captain should be your grizzled veteran. What has Tkachuk done? I mean, yeah, he's a dynamic player, but he has no playoff experience. You know, like, he's barely been around this league. What value does the team get making him the captain? I think Gio is still the rock on this team. Gio is still the old guy who can give advice. Like, I think Tkachuk will get an A this year, and I think he'll move towards that so that when Gio is no longer captain, he'll take over. But there's no point in changing it. What's the value to the team? It's not like Gio's a disruptive force in the locker room.
Well, the only thing that I was thinking, and I'm not saying that this would happen, but there is a possibility Gio goes unprotected.
Yeah, but even then, I don't think he gets taken.
Yeah, maybe.
I can see them unprotecting him because they need the numbers. But if I'm Seattle, why do I take a guy like that? I think if you want a veteran goalie, there will be more available, and more available as a UFA. I don't see the point in taking Gio. I still think Gio retires a Flame.
Yeah.
I agree that a young defensive core, we need a veteran guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are you happy with Anderson, Hanifin, Tanev, Valamaki, Nestorov? You need a veteran guy, and I think it's going to cost us more to get a different veteran guy than just to keep the one we have.
Fair. I think a lot of people were calling for that in the off season. I mean, I think Gio should retire a Flame, but I mean, that is an argument that has come up. So
this team likes him. He does good things around town. I think there will be a discussion with him of, Gio, if you want to retire here, we'll make it happen. If you don't want to retire here, we'll expose you or find another home for you. Right? And I mean, just like Iggy, right? We all want him to retire Flame, but at the same time, we want him to go get his cup. And so I think there will be that discussion of, Gio, do you want to go somewhere else, try and get that cup?
Yeah.
The Ray Bourque analogy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Gio and Backlund, I think, are interesting cases because they're sort of in their final legs. Moving Lindholm to center moves Backlund down.
I like Backlund, and I think Backlund has a place here, but paying $5 million for a third-line center is not something I think this team can stomach long-term. And again, if we're looking at pieces of that value, I think Backlund is on most teams a second-line center, and I think you could find value moving that deal if you need to.
Yeah.
Or even I foresee Backlund being exposed in the expansion draft as well, because
Seattle taking.
And I could see them taking him because he's a 2C, and he'll be a 2C for another couple years.
And he's on a good contract, especially for a team coming in. You know, I mean, if I have a choice of Backlund or Gio, I take Backlund.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. All right. I think we've covered everything.
There's still one question we have to ask Dan, though.
Oh, that's right. Dan, it is our topic du jour.
It is Chabot versus Hughes. Who's the top D-man in this division?
Of those two?
Oh, so it's not your top D-man's not one of those two?
Well, what are we classifying as top D-man? Points-wise, fan perspective? Like, what is our...
Just your opinion, because this all started when Sportsnet did their rankings of the top 5 D-men in this division, right? The top 5 D-men on Canadian teams, and it just ended up devolving into an argument between Devin and I on who's better, Chabot and Hughes, because I think we came to a consensus that those two are the two best defensemen in this division. you've got, because you look at everyone else, and Weber's no longer where he was at. Gio's no longer where he was at a couple of years ago. Riley, Morrissey, Petrie, Schmidt, they're not quite there yet, or just not quite at that level. And it comes down to Chabot versus Hughes in our opinion. And it's become a bit of a running argument that happens almost every episode.
I think Chabot is going to be the guy that's going to look better this year, because I think he's going to be playing top minutes on a surprisingly deep Ottawa team. I think Hughes is going to be the better guy of the future, because I think he has a long way to go still to develop. So I think if you're looking at the guy who fans are going to notice more, I think Chabot will better contribute to his team's success.
Okay. Interesting.
I think if I look at these two, if you ask me the same question 3 years, I think Hughes will be my answer. But this year, I think Chabot is going to be the guy that will. I'm not saying Hughes won't contribute to his team's success. I think it's a lot like Hanifin here. He has a role. He'll play that role well. You might not notice him as much, but I think he'll play his role well. But I think Chabot is going to be looked at to be a big guy on a very competitive Ottawa team.
Okay. We don't have Devin to make big gesture of like
I'll
confusing looks. It's my turn.
Are we doing the wave?
He has a role. He's their number one defenseman.
He is right now, but I don't know the Vancouver is going to be as successful as they were last year. I think that's a team that could slip, and so he may not contribute to their success as much.
The way I look at Hughes is that the way he controls the play when he's on the ice, the way he can change the game is there's very few defensemen that can do that. Chabot is up there. He can do that as well. I just don't think he does it at the same level that Hughes does. And I think that Ottawa is going to be a tough win every time you play them, but they don't have the defense outside of Chabot.
Agreed.
They do not have Matt Murray actually rediscover his cup-winning form, or like actually change his game to match the way the NHL's played now? And do they actually have they have enough offense? I don't think they do. So in terms of where I think Chabot's going to get, I think people are going to have their eyes open for Chabot this year, because they're actually going to see him play a lot more because of this division and all that. But I know maybe
he looks good without a good partner though. Who's his partner this year?
For Chabot?
No, Hughes. Who do you pair Hughes with?
Hughes is going to be paired with. It sounds like they're actually going to try and put Hominick there.
See, and that's the thing. I think Hughes is definitely good, but I think you can only be so good playing with Hominick. I think Chabot will look even better playing with good Branson or Zaitsev. We'll see.
But the other thing is, go to tie this back into some of the discussions we've had previously on the way Travis Green runs his blue line. He's gonna get ice time with Schmidt. He's gonna get ice time with Tyler Myers. Like, he's not going to just get Hominick's he's not going to get stapled with Hominick, because that he was paired with Tanev last year, but he also got significant minutes with Edler at time. He got minutes with Edler. He got minutes with Tyler Myers. He got minutes with Jordy Ben. So it's just, I don't know. Like I said, maybe just the way you phrased it, where you're like, oh, he's got a role like Noah Hanifin. I'm like, whoa.
I guess when I said that, I mean that he's a younger guy who maybe isn't ready to break out yet. And I think that you might see Chabot looking better, because I think he's on a better overall team.
You have more trust in.
Whoa. Did you just say that Ottawa is a better overall team than Vancouver?
I think Ottawa has a lot more depth pieces. I think that they could surprise this year. I think they're going to be surprised at the Canadian division.
Oh, my. Devin talked about the Oilers YYC guys having greasy takes. Holy smokes. There's going to be a grease fire off of that
if there's one surprise I think we're going to see this year, I think it's going to be that Ottawa's going to surprise and Vancouver's going to disappoint in our division.
Whoa! Where's that hot?
Yeah, you're. Oh man, I'll just tell you right now, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Like they may slide a little bit, but not that much. Not that much.
There's 3 teams that won't make the playoffs. Who do you think they're going to be in the North?
Ottawa, Winnipeg, and then it gets very, very tough.
I wanted to save this, but I'll say it now. I have the Oilers not in the playoffs.
Yeah, who's going to stop a puck for them? And they have to deal with Tyson Barrie, who's doesn't know how to play defense.
I mean, we were talking earlier about potential trades to be made. I mean, if the Oilers have no puck stopper and we find that Riddick is expendable, might be a deal to be made there.
Maybe.
I hate trading with the Oilers. I love for years the Flames had like a 20-year no-trade agreement with the Oilers, and then they broke it, and it wasn't even a good deal. I could see if you broke it for a star. We broke this deal of not trading for 20 years to bring in Steve Stamkos. It's like, really? That was the best deal that we could have got? Okay. No, I hope I'm wrong, but I always like to have sort of one out-of-the-box prediction. My prediction this year is that Ottawa really does better, and I think the Vancouver could slide. We'll see. The division can be so tight. I think that even sliding doesn't mean you do terrible. I think that sliding could even be 1 7-game losing streak, I think, could even get you out of the playoff picture this year.
And that's where I'm at. I understand that. I just when again, it's phrasing. Vancouver's got Pedersen and Hughes, two of the big, like the most talented players in this division.
Yep.
To me, for them, it comes down to the goaltending and the defense and all that. If Holtby and Demko can give them 80% of what Markstrom did last year, then I think they're in very good shape.
But, you're saying they've got two of the top forwards, but the question of the defense, the goaltending, this sounds like the conversation every year around Edmonton, right? I mean, I'm not denying that there's some good players in Vancouver, but when I look at the roster, it's one of the not as complete rosters in the Canadian division.
Every team has their flaws, though.
For sure.
I guess we talked about how unbalanced the Flames roster is, right? And the question marks on their bottom pair as well. Are JT Miller and Tanner Pearson top 6 guys? That's a question. I'm sorry. JT Miller is a top.
JT Miller
is a top 6 guy. Yeah. Tanner Pearson's a 20-goal scorer. Like, is that not top 6 material?
We could debate this all day. I'll stand by my thoughts, which is I'm not denying that Vancouver has some good young talents, but so did Edmonton, right? But I think there's a lot of questions, like you said. There's questions on goal. There's questions on the back end. You can't win the division with 2 good players.
No, but they've got other. For me, like I said, when I say the questions in the goal, it's can Demko repeat what he did in the bubble? Yep. Can Holtby come in and be a good be a good relief, or even just push for starts and be a good solid goaltender? Do the Canucks learn from how they played it versus Vegas? Yeah. And with the addition of Nate Schmidt and adding that puck moving ability,
I think Vancouver's in a great place in their rebuild, but I think they're still a rebuilding team.
There's still ways to go. Like if Höglander can come in and start producing and then they've still got Podkolzin coming through. Yeah, I think they're 2-3 years away from being if everything goes right, to being a legit top team. But like I said,
we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong.
And
every year there's a team that gets overhyped, and I think that might be the Canucks this year. But we'll see.
Even though that's your take is basically everyone's take right now, that they're going to slide. They're not getting overhyped at all.
I don't know. Sitting here, it sounds like they're getting overhyped, but we'll see.
Oh, well, to borrow a phrase from Devin, I'm a Canucks honk.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll have me on the end of the season, and I can say I was wrong, and Vancouver won the division, and Ottawa was not in the playoffs.
I just don't see where Ottawa can catch anyone on talent, and unless Matt Murray's making 45 saves a game and has 7 shutouts.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, let's leave it there. What do you got going on for Fireside Podcast this year?
We're actually recording our first episode of season 9 tomorrow, so that'll be out early in the week before the season starts. So if anyone wants to listen to our take on the Flames, we record every week during the season. We'll be recording most Sundays because the Flames don't play a lot of Sundays. And our shows, we're not sure exactly when they'll come out, Monday or Tuesday. We're still working on that, but you can listen to us, firesidechat.ca. On Twitter, we're at Fireside Podcast, Facebook.com/Fireside Chat, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. I guess not sold for free, but wherever fine podcasts are downloaded, you can find us as well. So find us on Spotify, find us on TuneIn, wherever you like to get your podcasts, you'll find Fireside Chat.
Cool. And too bad we didn't get Matt, but that's okay. Matt, hello. Dan, thanks for coming on. And how do we follow Sean?
I am BeardedCanuck03 on Twitter.
And Devin is GordHav09, who I'm sure just will now, he's going to jump up and down for all of your take, Dan. Hey, I think he's having a field day. Heidi Amazeballs, Schneid's SCHNEIDZ.
Well, if he wants to debate me, he can come on our show.
Or Devin's on your side.
Okay, there you
Devin
go.
is absolutely on your side.
It's good to have a take team partner.
Yeah. Schneid's SCHNIDZ. Tyler is T Noble. I am KVOLE. Subscribe, facebook.com, youtube.com, wherever you find podcasts are sold. Tomorrow, we've got Stefan Roger from Canucks Army. We're going to preview the Canucks. We may need to clip this conversation.
All right.
Yes. Thanks, everyone, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.